Hey everyone, in this video I'm going to be detailing how I draw this wolf and how I build up the fur. I'm going to be using Prismacolor markers, golden fluid acrylics, and I'm combining them together and painting this on a Strathmore mixed media 400 series paper. So I didn't have time to do a full tutorial on this particular painting, and I get a lot of questions about the time lapses that I post, so I thought I would try expand and provide as much as I can on how I go about creating this fur and painting this wolf using this particular method. So here we go. So if you haven't used these alcohol-based markers before, they basically have a nice brush tip and they allow you to blend them together. Copic markers or Copic markers are the same thing, but I'm using Prismacolor brush tip markers. And this is just a fun process and a fun way to paint fur. So I encourage you to give it a try if you'd like to. You could do the same thing using paints as well. So the first thing that I do is I look for the darkest areas of the portrait or drawing that I'm doing, and I want to fill that in with a medium tone. So I'm using a 40% gray, and I'm filling in the areas that will be the darkest of the dark. So they will be pure black when I'm done, but I'm just using a 40% to get started. And then what I'll do is I'll take a lighter color, so a 20%, and I want to start blocking in the areas where those mid-range grays are going to be. So it's a little bit lighter, and I just want to fill in some of the areas and just shade in some of those tones. Now you'll also see me switch to color, so I'm using Cinnamon Toast, which is a color similar to, say, burnt sienna, and I'm also using a blonde wood, which is a little bit of a lighter yellow color, and I want to block in those areas that will have some color as well. So I start to divide up different areas of the wolf between gray and color and darks, so that I have a really good idea of where everything is before I get into the detail and the saturation of the drawing, before I start adding a lot of those saturated colors. So once I've got a rough idea of where the color is going to be and where the gray tones are going to be, I want to go back to those areas that I initially added for the darkest areas, and I want to really make them dark this time. So I'm using a pure black, and I want to fill that in so I don't lose track of where that is. So I'm basically going to go to any area that I know is going to be black, and I want to go ahead and color that in. So once those darkest areas are colored in, I'm going to switch back to a 60% gray, and I'm going to start filling in some detail. So this is going to be somewhat in between the initial gray I laid down and the black. And what I want to do is start adding texture that gives the appearance of fur. So I'm not worried about specific details. I just want to, as a whole, build up the general idea of fur texture. So I'm using a lot of random brush strokes with this marker, and I'm just filling in any area that has somewhat of this similar texture present, and I'm just going to go ahead and lay it on. Now what you'll see me do as I lay on this fur texture is switch to a lighter color gray, and then I might even switch to a darker color, even black. And I basically want to add some different variations in this fur texture, so some lighter tones, some darker tones. Just depends where it exists in my reference photo, and I just want to try and match it as best I can. So again, I'm not worried about specifics. I just want the texture to start building up in the appropriate areas. Now, as I move lower into the lower jaw and the bottom half of this drawing, I'm basically going to repeat the same process I did for the upper half, just using some slightly different sized brush strokes. So I'm using some shorter strokes around the snout and some longer strokes back down where the neck will be. And I basically want to build it up using the same process. So I add the darkest darks first, then I add some of those mid-range grays, and then I go back with some darker tones and I add some shadows, and then I add some lighter tones, and I'll even take a little bit of the color and I might wash in some color very lightly in a couple areas. But you can see that around the snout it almost becomes pixelated because I really want the fur to appear short in the areas where that should be, such as the snout. Okay, so now comes the fun part when I get to paint. So what I'm doing is I'm taking burnt sienna and I water it down with a lot of water. So this is almost like watercolor. And in fact, you could use watercolor for this and it might even be better suited, but this is just what I have. So just a lot of water, and all I'm doing is basically washing this on. So I'm looking for the areas that have the most saturated colors, or I'm just looking to match the color of what I want it to be in the finished result, and I'm just going to wash that into the paper. And so all this is doing is colorizing the paper. It's soaking into the paper right away. It dries very fast, and I go right over the top of the marker and I basically glaze any color on where I want it to be. I'm using a 1/4 inch filbert brush for this, and just using a lot of random brush strokes and really just scrubbing it on any which way that I can to manipulate that color and how it appears on the paper as best that I can. So no special process, just start laying on color with a soft brush. Once the drawing appears nice and colorized, we've got a lot of those values that are established and they're looking very good. We're getting close to the finished result in terms of the color, contrast, and just overall appearance of the wolf. I want to switch to a smaller brush. So I'm using a number 2 round brush, which I can get a nice fine point, and I'm using some pure black, and I want to really saturate those dark values. Any area that I want there to be black, I'm going to go ahead and do that first and saturate those areas. So the eye, and then I'll look for the darkest tones in the fur, and I'll use the very point of that brush and try to add some very thin, dark lines within the fur texture, and that's going to really add a lot of contrast and a lot of life to the fur. Now when I get to areas such as the ear, which I want just some subtle gray tones, and I want them to be very soft, maybe appear like there's some shadow forming in the upper half of the ear, I'm basically going to add more water to the mixture so that's very, very watered down black, and I'm going to scrub it on really fast, and that just shades the area with a little bit of color and gives the appearance of some shadow. So again, I just use the brush every which way I can to try and manipulate how the paint appears on the paper. So use different mixtures of water, add more water in some cases, less water in others. You're just going to have to experiment it, and you'll see how that changes the way that it appears when you apply it. So another good example is the nose. I'm basically just adding more water to the paintbrush, and I scrub it on, and then I'll use my finger and sort of blend it out quickly before it dries, just to add some subtle shade, some subtle shadows to the nose, and some different variations in contrast throughout the nose as well. Now I've begun to go back with the filbert brush and just wash on some color into the background, just to add some subtleties and just some more character to the overall drawing. So I'm just washing on paint into the background, using my fingers to blend that out as well. And then I'm ready to add some highlights. So I'm going to switch to a liner brush or a spotter brush, very small, and I'm going to mix some paint with some water, and I'm going to start tapping on some very subtle highlights. So it'll go on not quite pure white, because as it soaks into the paper, it'll dull down a little bit, but this is just providing some very subtle highlights to the fur, to the nose, and it's really going to bring everything to life, and that's really going to give us the finished look that we're after. So I'm going to go throughout the snout, tapping on, just spotting on little highlights wherever I can find them, and then I'll do the same thing with the forehead and areas around the cheek, and just add some very, very small white strokes to the painting, to the fur, and that's going to bring that fur to life. All right, now the final step is to finish the eyeball. So I've mixed some raw sienna mixed with a lot of water, and I'm just going to scrub it on in the eye to colorize the eye with a little bit of yellow. And then what I'll do is I'll add some more black with, again, a lot of water, and I'm going to wash on some shadow on the upper portion of the eye just to create some three-dimensionality to the eye, and of course that'll also make the eye socket, the area around the eye, appear to have some three-dimensionality to it as well. So I'm just adding some shadow, just glazing on some dark color to the upper portion, and then I'll switch back to a lighter color. So this has got some white with a little bit of raw sienna, and I'm going to add on a base layer for the highlight, and then once that base layer of highlight is on, I'll switch to a pure white with no water, and I want to really tap on a bright highlight in both of the eyes just to set it off, to really enhance it and to finish it. And so that's it. I'll add a little more color to the background and just some minor adjustments throughout the wolf itself, but that's pretty much finished, and I'm very happy with it. So thank you so much for watching. I know this is a little bit different than my normal videos, So I would love to hear what you thought about this. Please be sure to leave your comments and your feedback in the description below. I would really like to hear what you thought. And of course, if you had questions, please be sure to ask and leave them in the comments. I really liked how this one came out. It was a lot of fun for me. I thoroughly enjoyed the process. I hope you guys did as well. If you'd like to support my channel, please remember to check out my free print giveaway, as well as my eBay auctions and website. Remember that I auction off all of the paintings I do here on the videos through my eBay, so please check that out and share it with a friend. Thank you again so much for watching. We will see you next time.